Welcome to the Artists Index. I'm Scott Bishop, your host for this episode. I'm a New Bedford-based singer, songwriter, and sound sculptor making music under the name Scapegoat. I also present the live concert series, Unexpected Music, which features South Coast musicians performing in non-traditional performing spaces around New Bedford. The In Focus podcasts are generously sponsored in part by Heavenly Spirits Importers and funded in part with grants from the New Bedford Cultural Council and the Fairhaven Cultural Council, local agency supported by the Mass Cultural Council, a state agency. I'd like to invite our guests to introduce themselves, spell their name, and talk a little bit about what they do.
My name is Lindsay Compton, LINDSAYCOMPTON, and I'm the Youth and Arts Coordinator at New Bedford Whaling National Historical Park. So I manage our Artists in Residence program and kind of the whole suite of creative and artistic programs that we offer. And then I also manage the youth programs. So all the summer camps that we run and kind of all the ways in which we engage New Bedford youth. And then I'm also a park ranger on top of all of that. So I do the park rangery stuff like guided tours and staffing a visitor center and providing information to folks. So kind of a wide range of things.
And where do you give tours around? I've always wondered that.
Yeah, downtown New Bedford mostly. Yeah, kind of the historic district. The 33 acres that make up the historic district downtown is where we offer tours. And we've done tours kind of slightly outside of that boundary, like walking up to the Nathan and Polly Johnson home and to the Roachstone Stuff House. So we do those kind of tours as well, but mainly focused on that historic district downtown.
And how long have you been with the Park Service?
In total, I've been with the Park Service 13 years. Yeah, I know, right? Teenager. Wow. And I've been at New Bedford Whaling since August of 2019. So just surpassed my third anniversary here.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
What prompted you to get into the Park Service?
So I studied actually art and parks and recreation management in my undergrad and did an internship after I graduated. And, at that time was really interested in doing a lot of different things, outdoor education, didn't really see National Park Service as a path. But after that summer internship, I was like, wait, people get paid to hang out in the woods or in cool historic places and like tell people about it. So I had a really great experience that first summer season, then went back and got a master's degree in education and ended up working at a number of sites. So this is my sixth site, but it all started with like a random internship opportunity. I had no idea kind of what the Park Service did before that time.
Where were you before this? So there were 5 other parks before New Bedford.
Yes. So working backward, if I can do that chronologically, I'll try. Working backward, most recently, San Antonio Missions National Historical Park in San Antonio, Texas. Before that, Colorado National Monument in Western Colorado. Before that, Congaree National Park in Columbia, South Carolina. Before that, the Oklahoma City National Memorial in downtown Oklahoma City, where the 95 bombing took place. And then before that, where I actually did my summer season, was Chickasaw National Recreation Area in Sulphur, Oklahoma.
Wow. You've been all around.
I've been all around.
What brought you to New Bedford?
So what's funny about New Bedford is it's kind of always been on my radar in the Park Service because of the YAP program. So I actually heard about the YAP program, oh gosh, probably 10 years ago or so. And I was like, what is happening in New Bedford where, the National Park Service is working with like youth who's creating hip hop kind of music videos and original songs. But then when my dog is sitting behind me and doing her beauty routine. So she's making a lot of noise. Sorry about that. So what brought me to New Bedford is, it's kind of always been on my radar as like a weird kind of cool National Park Service place. But when this job came open, it was the Artist in Residence coordinator position. And so it was a combination of kind of my background. I'd been administering Artist in Residence programs at a couple of other National Park Service sites before coming here. So it was kind of a beautiful mix of all the things I'd been working on, kind of leading up to 2019. So yeah, like 6 different people in the National Park Service sent me the job announcement. They were like, "Was this position written for you?" So
Oh,
I
wow.
applied and got the job, and it just kind of worked out. So yeah, it's really been kind of a combination of interest. And then on my second interview, I was actually able to come to New Bedford in person to interview. And I fell in love with New Bedford when I came to visit. So here we are.
So what goes into managing the youth art program?
Yeah. Um, so I have one other staff member that I work with that helps me with the youth programs, and we are a member of the Greater New Bedford Youth Association. So we kind of have our, I guess, have a lot of interests around New Bedford, and we're involved in a lot of different groups. So we primarily work with local partners that help empower youth, like Third Eye Unlimited, um, and others, because we kind of see the value in working with youth around New Bedford. So we do these kind of one-off programs where we work with them on AHA nights, and then we also lead summer camps, and we actually have an April camp coming up this year. So yeah, we do a lot. We manage camps. We offer the Youth Leadership Academy in the fall, which is a program for, young leaders. And yeah, I think I'm talking in circles here about all the things that we do, but there's a lot that encompasses the youth program.
And what age range does the program cover?
So the program actually covers quite a big age range. So we have a story hour that serves, 0 to 5-year-olds. It's still virtual at this time just because of kind of the triple demic of sorts that we're going through. We hope to have that back in person in March, but so we serve kind of really young kids all the way up through, I would say, like early to mid 20s, because we offer internships as well. So we kind of have this ladder of opportunities available for youth to get involved.
So youth goes into young adulthood. It doesn't just cover school age kids. That's nice.
Exactly. Yeah, youth, according to the National Park Service, is 30 and under.
Wow. I wish I had known about that
Yeah.
when I was 30. I don't think I wasn't living near here, but just to be thought of as young, that would be nice.
Yeah, I know. I was considered young by the National Park Service, while employed by the National Park Service for quite some time, but I'm not in that demographic anymore.
So let's talk about the artist in residence program.
Absolutely.
So you've been managing that for 3 years. What goes into that program?
Yeah, so really we've kind of tried to bring the program up to modern standards. So previous to my arrival, we were kind of doing these like paper applications. So really just kind of getting things online, making sure we were casting the net for applications as wide as possible. So I've kind of revolutionized the way we've accepted applications and kind of selected artists, but we host 4 artists a year, and that we host them for 3 months at a time. And Scott, you can speak to your experience
Most definitely.
as a resident artist. But we primarily work with local artists to ask them to use New Bedford as a source of inspiration for their work, whatever medium it might be. And we ask them to create a project during their residency that kind of centers New Bedford as their source of inspiration. So I work with the artists quite a bit to come up with special programming throughout their residency, ensuring that they have what they need to work in residence, connecting them with local partners if they need to work with another organization to complete the project. So currently we have a team, artists in residence, and one of them wants to work with clay, and we don't have a kiln. So, connecting them with local resources where they can fire their pieces and things like that. And then I also assist kind of internally with the National Park Service and artists in residence. So I'm actually helping facilitate like the Weir Farm National Historic Site residency. So it encompasses not only just kind of the work I do within the park directly with the artists and with the community, but also kind of in the National Park Service as well.
And you talked about opening up the application process technologically. It seems like that's expanded geographically who's involved in the program, because I used to think of it as a local program, but we're recording this in early February. Your current artists in residence are a couple, and they're from Seattle, Washington.
That's correct. Yeah. So it's really been quite amazing. Our residency is different in that we don't offer housing. So it is unique in that, if folks do want to come from far away, they have to secure their own housing. It's a studio-based residency. There's my dog again. It's a studio-based residency.
It's okay. We can't hear your dog, so
oh,
probably
good,
just distracting you.
Yeah, I just heard her ears flap behind me, so I was like, she's adding her own creative elements to this podcast. But
she wants to say as well. She's a part of
exactly. So so yeah, we post our announcements on anyartist.org, and because that's a national call for residencies and projects, we often get applications from all over the United States. We've also had applications from international artists as well. We have not yet hosted an international artist, but maybe in the future. So yeah, I think we've really kind of expanded beyond New Bedford, which is exciting in that, there are a lot of people who use New Bedford as a source of inspiration, even if they're not living locally, because New Bedford is kind of a cross section of so many incredible, like, global history stories and national history stories. So the folks who are from Washington State wanted to do a specific project about a person who was born in New Bedford named Dr. Marie Equi. And how they heard about her and started to study her, I have no idea. But just because they're from Seattle, I was kind of thinking, okay, well, what will people outside of New Bedford want to say about New Bedford? What could they possibly have to say? And it's been pretty interesting to hear what people have to say. But I will kind of, in the center of all that, I will say New Bedford's program is still very New Bedford centric.
Right.
In that the majority of the artists that we do host are from New Bedford. And that is a huge goal of mine, is to see that the money, the stipends that we give artists, go back into the community. Because I don't want to host artists from all over the world year round, and then we don't have any local representation of what the stories mean to people who live here or who were born here. So it's a good balance.
At the same time, it's nice to get that outside perspective you're describing, because we view the city we live in, in maybe a certain set of ways, because I didn't grow up here, but I came, from Boston, moving here with my wife who grew up here. But the view of somebody who's coming from 3,000 miles away is a very different perspective.
Yeah. It's really cool to kind of see the city through new eyes in that way, to see what people kind of grab onto and what people are inspired by in the many stories that we have here.
What does the rest of the year look like in terms of the artists and what they're doing?
Yeah, so the current artists are Beatrice and Elaine Alder, and they'll be with us through the end of March. And they're working on a really cool visual project that includes like art objects, quilts, block prints, and written word. So they're going to do an exhibition at the end of March that will be open to the public. So that's really something to look forward to. April through June, we have an artist from Providence. His name is Matt Steinke, and he's a sound installation artist. So I'm really eager to see what he comes up with. He actually came by yesterday for a site visit, and we were kind of imagining where things could go. And I'm like, "What are you thinking about making?" He's like, "I have no idea yet, but I'm really excited." So, we're really excited about that. July through September is a photographer named Calder Sell. And that's a really exciting project as well, because we'll be able to see his photographs through his eyes, and he's not from New Bedford. So I'm really eager to kind of see how he interprets the city. And then the last residency, October through December, is Taylor Hickey, a local printmaker and artist. And I'm really excited about her residency. I would consider her kind of like a multi-hyphenate artist. She does printmaking and installations and video art. and kind of these immersive experiences as well, where you're kind of surrounded by some of her print work. So really eager for kind of the whole suite of artists that we have hosted this year.
I wanted to ask about your sound artist, because his project, in terms of like how he stated it to you, which is, I don't know what I'm going to come up with, that flashed me back to when I proposed my project to you, which was also a sonic project. What's it like when somebody proposes something and it's basically like, I have a methodology, I don't know what I'm going to produce?
Yeah, so what I will say is most of the time people articulate very well their ideas, which is why they're selected, right? So his idea was fully articulated, but you know how it is as an artist. You can articulate what you want to do. And then when you get into the space, you're like, okay, not what I imagined. So this is going to pivot 180 degrees the other way. Still going to be in the same vein because it's my medium and my work. So I think he has an idea of what he's doing kind of based on that initial project submission. But I think now that he's actually in it and a couple, 6 weeks or so out from starting, he's like, well, yeah, what am I gonna do? So yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I just want to say that what I appreciated when I worked as artist in residence was the sense of freedom that the artists
Yeah,
get, and that I got, to just say, I don't know exactly what this is going to turn into, and to be able to do that pivoting. I felt like I pivoted like 2 or 3 times based on the material I was recording, because I was recording sounds all around the city and not
yeah,
knowing what I was going to turn it into, and also having to learn my tools on the fly because it was a very different way of making music. And it
right.
just seems like that opportunity for discovery and for being able to shift what you're doing, if you basically provide a proof of concept, is really powerful. Like, people can go and be in the
Absolutely.
sandbox and go, wait a minute, I need to do this instead of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I try to be really mindful of ensuring that there's that flexibility for folks, because I know what it's like to be a creative person and start to tackle a project and then you're like, okay, wait, yeah, that's not even going to work. So I have to reimagine this very differently. And so I want to ensure that there's that room for um, marinating and changing and kind of doing all the things that we do in our creative process. I wouldn't ever want to hold somebody to like, well, you said you were going to do this, so why aren't you doing this?
Right.
If it's totally wildly off, I might go, okay, well, how are we going to still, serve the public and offer programs and that kind of stuff? But I'm never going to hold somebody to the letter of, what they submitted per se.
How's the program here in New Bedford evolved since you got here, aside from the application process, which going electronic is huge?
Yeah, I would say, we had a little bit of a speed bump with 2020
Yeah.
in that our program paused. So 2022 is really the first year that we've seen the program where we hosted, 4 artists, and it was a full year of programming. I would say the program has evolved in partnerships and kind of medium and scope of work. So prior to my arrival, it was a hyper local program. It was managed by a person who like inherited the program and hadn't necessarily worked in artist residencies before. And that's not a criticism of the person who managed the program for me. It's just a limitation that they had.
Well, you're bringing expertise to it, having an art background and degrees in those areas.
Yeah, I think the major change is that I've seen what programs look like in other parks, and so I'm able to kind of shape this program to emulate what's happening at other parks. And then also too, I think something I like to brag on is how many different partnerships we have because of projects like yours, right? So you had to go and chat with all these people about
Oh,
recording different sounds around the city. And so naturally, you're connecting our program to all of these partners around the city, even without my presence, my name, the program's name, whatever. You're saying, okay, yeah, I'm an artist in residence for the national park and I'm working on this project. And that's, I think, a really powerful way to spread information about the program in a way that feels really organic to kind of the way we do partnerships downtown. So because we're such a collaborative park and such a partnership heavy park, I would say that's kind of the biggest change I've seen is that incorporation of all of these other players in downtown to our program. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the national park wasn't doing anything with Play Arcade before. And,
Right.
when I talked to Adam and, told him what the project was, he's like, the park does that? Because it's,
Yeah.
people who live and work in the city may not be fully tuned in with what the program is. They might hear about an artist in residence, something's going on at the park, but maybe they're too busy to find out about it. And then
Right.
suddenly it's right in their lap with, someone like me showing up at their door and like, can I record my kids playing air hockey?
Right.
But I also think what was great was that, through you, I was able to connect with the Whaling Museum. And that was important
Right.
because I didn't necessarily have a contact in, but that's the New Bedford Whaling Museum is a pretty close partner of the park, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Again, partnerships I think, are really what make our park special. There's no other National Park Service site that I know of that is like federally mandated. It is written into law that we are supposed to work with community partners. No other national park really kind of has that written into their legislation. So it's such a New Bedford unique thing. So I'm really happy to hear you say that. And I hope those relationships can continue as well. Like those are just jumping off points for artists to be connected to those organizations.
Well, I've told people that whose businesses I went into and recorded sounds that didn't make the CD. I said, I still have your sounds. So I saw Ali from Besties over at Rose Alley Ale House because Dan Vasquez, the front man of a Muter, works at Besties. And I said, I have a sound that it's like a great spooky 80s synth that I created from your milk steamer. I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
Then I reached out to the Buttonwood Park Zoo because I found out that Emily the elephant likes to hit drums as part of her enrichment. And I'm like,
yeah.
Can I come back and record that? Because I got some great sounds at the zoo, but an elephant drummer would just be too much. And
didn't she go viral?
She did, because that was a few months ago on Instagram. I saw that. I'm like, I need to get an elephant drummer on my record somehow. Come on, who doesn't want that?
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
when things warm up in the spring, I'll head back and, when she's doing her drumming enrichment, we'll get her sounds and see what we can do with them.
I'm so excited about that. Can't wait to see what happens.
So let's talk about the application process for folks who aren't familiar with it, maybe interested in applying, because, we're going to post this probably closer to when the applications open in April. What does that process look like?
So we open the application period usually for a couple of months. So this year it'll be open April 1st to August 1st. And kind of like I said, we actually ask folks to use New Bedford as a source of inspiration and submit an application that kind of speaks to their work and how they'll use New Bedford kind of as that jumping off point. So folks can submit examples of work, a resume, letter of interest. I would say kind of the main thing is ensuring that the artist's vision is articulated in a way that shows direct public benefit. So how will you engage with our audience in a way that's unique to you and your work and your project? And I would say the projects that really kind of rise to the top are the ones that are really good at articulating those things. And then once the call closes, and we usually get around, 20 applications a year for 4 spots. And so after the application period closes, I bring together a panel of 3 people, usually an alumni of the program and local artists or arts administrators, and I change the panel every year. And I make those folks make the hard selections of who gets to be in residence. So we assemble a little panel, we kind of talk about our favorites, talk about the ones that have risen to the top, and we select our 4 artists. And then from there, the process goes, okay, I reach out to people and I say, you've been selected. Do you still want to work with us? And what time of year do you want to do it? So people are always applying for the following calendar year. So this year it'll be April through August for 2024 residencies, if that makes sense.
My next question is, and I had this experience with my project, a lot of times the project might kind of outlive the residency. How long has that happened where the work isn't quite done at the end of the 3 months and that artist is going to need to keep working on it the way I did with NB Waves?
It happens a lot because 3 months sounds like a long time until you're in it. and then you're like, whoa, this is going by so fast. So it happens a lot. One I think about often is Fitz's project of New Bedford,
Yeah.
And how that project really kind of started as a little seed of an idea in his residency. He took photographs of people from all over downtown, drew portraits of those people, and then ultimately included them in the prologue of New Bedford, this comic book he's making. And the comic book isn't even finished. The prologue came out in 2019, but he's hand painting all of these panels.
Yep.
So it's a tremendous amount of work. Another project I'm thinking of is Kate Sheridan, another comic book artist who was in residence last year and who's working on, this comic book that will take probably quite some time to complete. Other people are able to tie it up in a nice bow at the end of their residency, but there are some where it's like, yeah, this is just kind of phase one of a really long-term project. And I really enjoy that aspect of the residency, that, not every residency looks the same. And some people complete their project. Some people have just completed the first phase of their project. And some people are like, yeah, this won't be done for another 10 years. So it's a wide range.
I think Fitz Lamar's project is also a great example of a really inventive and engaging public-facing event, because his graphic novel he was doing that at the park right after we moved to New Bedford. And so the first AHA night that I went out with my kids was to the park, and they got photographed as models for the prologue. They actually made it into the prologue, taunting a zombie in the lake at Buttonwood Park. And I just thought, what a way to engage the community. You could be in this graphic novel. You might be someone who's not been turned yet. You might be a zombie. I don't know yet. My joke to him was that, if my kids misbehave, I'll give you permission to turn them. But they were good. So ended up as regular kids, just annoying a zombie. But I thought there's some other examples of really engaging public-facing events that artists have done.
So, one that's kind of popping up, April Jakobek, a painter from Boston. She did a project around mental health, and she selected 4 people from New Bedford to paint portraits of and kind of talk about their individual relationship with mental health. And we did this whole painting workshop where we invited 12 women from the community to come in and paint and really kind of talk pretty deeply about the artwork that they were creating was based oftentimes around trauma that they had experienced. And because April was a mental health professional and an artist, it was a very unique way to engage with people. She wasn't offering therapy sessions, but that painting workshop felt very much like a therapeutic painting workshop, in that all of those 12 people that came, I think everybody hugged at the end. Like it was just a really powerful, very impactful program. And, that's really unique in that the source of inspiration was New Bedford women, not like New Bedford as, this kind of place, but the people who inhabit the city. So I think that was a really impactful project as well.
That's beautiful. I remember hearing about that and thinking how powerful that must have been to be in that room with that shared experience, and to have someone who not only been there but was an artist and had a therapeutic background kind of guiding the process.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible. And then the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
We were going to host one more, but we weren't able to. Her residency ended at the end of March, but as you know, pandemic happened mid-March 2020, so we weren't able to host another one. But
I'm wondering what aspects of artist in residence programs that have worked elsewhere have you instituted here?
Oh, well, I think it's not necessarily something I instituted here, but something that I'm like will not compromise on is paying artists. That's certainly something. So I started an artist in residence program at Congaree National Park, and then I also started one at San Antonio Missions. And in both of those places, I was like, the foundation of this program is that we are going to put money in artists' pockets. We're not going to be an organization that asks people to work for us for exposure. And that's in air quotes, by the way. No one can see me doing that. Exposure is in air quotes. But yeah, I think something that I've definitely brought with me is like this kind of fierce dedication to ensuring that people are paid for the work that they do. And I think that's a really unique thing in the National Park Service, in that there aren't a lot of mechanisms to pay, like systems in place to pay artists. And as you know, there are some bureaucratic hurdles that we have to go through to do that, because we are still part of the federal government. But we pay people, and I'm very, very proud of that aspect of this program.
I think I can speak for artists who've been in the program and saying that I'm grateful for that too, because it gave me the freedom to dedicate more time to the work in a situation where if money was an issue, I might not have been able to. And I'm sure that's true for the other artists in the program. Having that stipend and that additional support is huge for being able to concentrate on the work and deliver something that's going to be valuable to the community, as opposed to like, oh God, I got to make rent. I got to go work my side gig.
Right.
My artist in residence project is going to have to wait.
Right. Exactly.
What is being done in the program here that's new and works compared to the other places you've been at?
Well, the other places I've been, there's always been kind of like an external partner that helps fund the program. So trying to do that here, with developing relationships with people, with organizations like the Whaling History Alliance, which is our park official friend group. And they are raising money and applying for grants to kind of offset some of the costs of the artist in residence program. So just trying to get creative as federal budgets don't expand as time passes. Federal budgets are kind of shrinking, in fact. Just trying to come up with creative and innovative ways to ensure that people will always still be paid. Even if we can't pay them directly, that there's a mechanism that works with us that can also still pay the artists. So yeah, and I think especially now, more so than any time, it's like we need to ensure that people have money to live.
Yeah. This came up in a conversation with the musician Mercy Bell. That the last person I recorded a conversation with is just, let's pay people for the work and value they bring. And particularly in an environment where, you can go online and listen to virtually any song for free, or find any piece of art, or watch any video. To value individual artists' work and recognize the time, experience, and expertise that go into it is considerable. And and honestly, the value of art to our society, I think, has been undermined. But
1,000%.
It's crucial to the internal well-being of people to have creative enterprises that nourish them, and to have people around to create things in those enterprises, and to be able to create as well. All right, I'm off.
And no. I mean, I'll put you right back on there and join on there with you. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think artists are often undervalued, and have been for many, many years. Something I always bring up is like, okay, during the Great Depression, the federal government paid artists.
Yes, they
did.
The
federal government paid artists to be a part of, the kind of the whole suite of things that FDR did, but primarily the WPA. So there is precedent for the federal government to employ artists, and I think certainly that's something I want to continue to take forward.
And I think you mentioned earlier that money goes right back into the community. When you pay artists, they're not usually, I can speak for myself here too, they're not usually throwing it in like a Roth IRA or something.
Right.
They're going out and doing more art with it, or they're buying groceries, or they're buying other people's work. It always goes back into the community. So it's always a public benefit when artists are being paid.
Absolutely.
Is there a learning curve when you bring on someone in a new medium? Some like like I
For
think
me,
like, yeah,
a learning
for
curve
you in
for
terms
me.
of managing a project. I think of like the curve of like you worked with Sarah Donner, dear friend of mine on She
Hmm.
Makes Waves. That was the
Hmm.
first musician you worked with. Was there a learning curve working with her and then bringing that into working with, say, me or Candida Rose, or you have a sound artist coming in for the second quarter of the year?
Yeah, well, so I'm kind of thinking my answer is in two parts. One, yes, there's a steep learning curve, I think, for me, particularly if I am not somewhat experienced in that medium, because I've dabbled in a lot of different stuff. So I feel like I know enough to be dangerous in a lot of different mediums. Um, but there is always a steep learning curve when it is a new medium. I think musicians are always just so cool to work with because musicians see the world in such a unique way. So I think working with artists like Sarah and working with artists like you prepped me for working with artists like Candida and with Matt, who's a sound installation artist. Um, and I think maybe the more true statement is that there's a learning curve with each individual artist
Mm.
because I have to like learn how that person and I are going to work together. What's the best way to communicate with that person? How do they respond to some of the constraints that we might have? So I think the learning curve maybe more comes in with like me and the individual versus like the medium.
Right, because
If that,
everyone's idiosyncratic. We're all different artists. Like Sarah's a
yeah,
very different person and musician from me, and I'm very different from Candida. That leads me to
absolutely.
my next question, which is so the Alders are the first couple you've had. They're the first team.
Yeah,
What's it like
yeah.
working with a team as an artist in residence?
Um, it's been really great. Um, these artists, Beatrice and Elaine, have really just like hit the ground running. I'm really impressed with how much work they've been able to do to complete in just a month. Um, so I would say that is the major difference. Just like the output when you have two people is just so much more.
Yeah.
Um, I really like it in that it feels like the artists really have, they both speak the same language, and so the the communication when all three of us are together is really cool because it feels much more um, like a collaborative team effort, right? When we have that additional person. Um, I also think it's been really interesting too because they're both kind of doing different things while also working on the same project. So Beatrice is a literary arts; she's a writer, or they are a writer, excuse me. Um, and Elaine is a textile fiber artist. And so what's been really interesting is that they're not both making the same exact work. They're making separate work that's going to work together. So I'm really curious to see how their final exhibition is going to come together. I think that's really what's going to be different is ensuring that, both artists feel well represented and the work is reflective of both of them. And that it's in a place that serves the work well.
Is there any medium that you would love to see the park, have for artists in residence that hasn't happened yet?
Ooh. Um, wow. I haven't really thought about this too much. I mostly, because there's so many constraints on what we can't do, I mostly think about like things we can't host.
Ah,
Um, and so yeah, I think I am a 3D artist by nature, so I think I would really love to have a sculptor. I mean, we really haven't had someone who works in kind of like bigger 3D pieces. So I think, yeah, a sculptor would be really cool. And someone who's really steeped in social practice, I think. That's one thing that I think could be really quite a cool thing for the community is to host someone from the community who's engaged in social practice, whose work is like centered around engaging with people. Um, I think that would be pretty cool. Yeah. So all
nice.
the social practice artists out there, it's fun.
What's the most rewarding part of managing the program?
the creativity that I get to have in the work. Um, there oftentimes isn't a ton of room for creativity in everyday work. I would say, like in your typical kind of like 9 to 5 job, um, there often isn't room for a ton of creativity and new ways of doing things. And so I think the most kind of rewarding aspect of the work is really kind of um, empowering storytellers, artists to be creative and to try to support that in whatever way I can. I think that's definitely the most rewarding. And then also I get to dabble with stuff too. So like this weekend, um, our artists are hosting an artful mending workshop. And of course, I'm there to assist and help with anything that they might need, but also I will be in the back learning as well. So I think tapping into that creative muscle, tickling that creative muscle in my brain at work is probably my favorite part.
I have a non-art related question because I know you pretty well, Lindsay, but I did do a
Yeah.
little bit of research and I found
Oh,
an introductory video of you on Facebook.
oh
What is
no.
unique about your first name in your family?
Oh, so um so I was named after the Bionic Woman. Um, Not because of, anything other than my parents really liked the name Lindsay, spelled with an AY after Lindsay Wagner.
This tickled me pink because I grew up in the era of those shows, $6 Million Man and Bionic Woman, and it's so funny because I'm in my 50s now, and I just flash back to watching those shows, and Lindsay Wagner was all over TV in the 1970s. I just thought it was
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. Yep, named after the Bionic Woman. Uh,
Yep. Yep.
but you don't have
Yeah.
any bionic parts as far as you know.
I got LASIK a year ago and I feel pretty bionic now
You
that
got
I don't
bionic
have to wear
eyes.
glasses. Yeah. So maybe I am living up to the name.
That's a superpower, ditching your glasses.
Yeah, exactly.
Lindsay, is there anything you want to share about the program that we haven't already talked about?
Well, I guess something that's really exciting that's just kind of in its infancy in terms of, we're just prepping and planning and kind of figuring out the ideas around a project, um, a collaboration with NOAA, another federal organization, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. Whew, hard to say. Um, so we're working with NOAA, and we will be recruiting an artist who works specifically with marine debris. So we have this really kind of special one-off program that we're doing as a part of our artists in residence that will be implemented in 2024. So I haven't quite figured out if that will be a separate application or if that will be embedded into our kind of larger call for artists. But 2024 will look a little bit different in that we may end up hosting only 3 artists because one artist may do like a 6-month residency where they're working on this marine debris project. I don't know exactly what materials we'll be using yet, but I'm hoping we'll be using old fishing nets so we can talk about kind of the modern fishery and connect it to whaling in a way, and also talking about climate impacts of marine waste and marine debris. So I'm really, really excited about that collaborative project coming up.
Anything else you want to talk about?
Well, I could talk about anything, really.
Well, I can hit you with a couple of the questions or variations of the questions I usually ask.
Sure. Yeah.
Who is an artist, living or dead, that you wish you could have be an artist in residence? Anyone.
Oh my gosh. Anyone?
Anyone across all history.
Wow.
I mean, they can be alive, but you got the whole of art history to work with.
Oh my gosh.
I usually ask this question to musicians in the form of what musician, living or dead, would you like to have in your band? So that's the variation.
Yeah.
In this case, what artist would you like to show up and be artist in residence?
Oh my gosh, these are such good questions. So I am currently obsessed with Bisa Butler. Are you familiar with her work?
I'm not.
Bisa is her first name, Butler, Butler. Um, she is a fine artist, a quilter, a storyteller. She's incredible. If you Google her work, you're like, how did she paint this? And then you learn there's no paint on the work. It's actually all fabric.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, we could never afford to pay her what she's worth. But in a dream world, we could host someone like Lisa Butler. I think for me, there's this intersection of craft and art that I love to kind of explore. And also kind of how gender plays into that. So, for many years, these mediums that were considered craft, quote unquote, not fine art, are now being considered as fine art. Ceramics is one of them, quilting is one of them. Fiber arts could be included in that. So I really like kind of exploring that intersection of art and craft, and also where that kind of intersects with, you know, gender representation, sexuality, kind of all of things. So yeah, Lisa Butler would be pretty high on the list. And if I had to choose a musician, that might be harder.
Ooh.
Yeah, yeah. I might have to think about this one longer. I want to invite everybody in.
My last question is, what is your South Coast happy place?
Oh, I have so many South Coast happy places. Any of the beaches on the South Coast are certainly top of the list. Horseneck Beach in the winter and West Beach in the summer. I mean, if you ever want to find me in the summer, it's a really good chance I'm at West Beach. And I really love downtown. I think downtown is so beautiful and magical, especially on foggy, rainy days. It's definitely a happy place for me. Yeah, and all these like little tracts of land that we have, they're owned by different trusts where you can go and walk among, 1,000 daffodils in the spring. And I just think our natural resources around here are definitely my happy place. The farms around here are definitely my happy place. Yeah.
So many happy places.
So many happy places on the South Coast, which is why I love living here. No shortage of happy places.
And it's great to have you here, Lindsay. It was a joy to work with you in the Artist in Residence program.
Thank you.
I'm excited for the people this year who will get to work with you. I'm excited for the applicants who will submit their projects starting in April and to see what they do with the park. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks for joining us for another In Focus podcast, which is generously sponsored in part by Heavenly Spirits Importers and funded in part with grants from the New Bedford Cultural Council and the Fairhaven Cultural Council, local agency supported by the Mass Cultural Council, a state agency. I'm Scott Bishop, and thanks for listening to the Artists Index.